You're listening to the Radio Wammo Breakfast, only on Kiwi.
Well, the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference is now out of the way. Was anything decided? I'm not really sure. I don't think nothing groundbreaking. Pretty much the result was exactly what most people were expecting, which is pretty much nothing at all. So it's up to the people of the world, rather than the politicians, of course, to actually solve this issue, and probably that's where it rightfully lays, because it's all our problems, I suppose, this climate change thing. And Nick Potter, who is a chap who puts some thought into some of these issues. He calls himself an integrative researcher, facilitator, and also a social innovator as well. And he's got a blog called movingtides.blogspot.com, where he muses on such issues. And he joins us this morning. Good morning to you, Nick.
Good morning.
And we're going to be sort of examining, I suppose, the question: what will foster a more powerful climate change action movement?
That's right. Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head there, where you talked about we haven't really had much come out of Copenhagen from the last week or so, and so now it's really time for people just to really keep this movement alive and keep it growing more powerfully.
Now, you also approach climate change from a more refreshing angle, where you don't see it so much as the problem, but more the symptom.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess it's, a lot of my work this year has actually been through a group called Intersect. So I'm the chair of a trust called Intersect, which supports young professionals to take action on sustainability issues, or what we like to call thrivability these days. And that focus on thriving and thrivability is actually bringing a more positive mindset to climate change. And part of that is saying, well, this isn't the problem. If we keep looking at it as a problem, then it's not necessarily going to go away. And I sometimes use the analogy of saying it's a bit like a form of avoidable depression, really, and that if we actually start peeling back the layers and looking at where the sources of this so-called problem are, we'll realise it's actually just a symptom of other stuff happening below the surface.
Can you elaborate on that? Explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it depends how deep you want to go, really, but I guess sort of at a surface level, it's a consequence of how we're living and working in society. So just even, looking around us this time of year, we see a lot of people rushing around and burning up lots of energy and not necessarily being that happy in the process sometimes.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like we're running to stand still a lot of the time. So kind of feels that we're really, always trying to grow our economy to maintain our living standards. But most research shows that we haven't actually really had, for a lot of people in Western societies, much of an increase in quality of life over the last 30, 40 years.
Because there is this emphasis from governments that in order to have a happy population, the economy needs to keep on growing.
Yeah, and that is the major driver for government. Although if you look at what France recently, the president of France came out about, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, and basically said that they've finally acknowledged that GDP is not a good measure of even growth in a society and happiness, and they've decided to basically stop putting all their attention on that. That message hasn't really got through to New Zealand.
Well, because that's kind of wacky. That's crazy. That's revolutionary almost.
It is. Good old, the French. They love that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They're a bit ahead of us. But it's a hard one to drop, and I can see why politicians focus on GDP. It's a really easy measure, and I guess it's that simplicity of saying, well, if we're growing, it's good. If we're not growing, that's bad.
Yeah.
And so much is now underpinned by that growth mindset. And I think again, going deeper of just saying, well, it's not just how we're living and working; it's how we're actually looking at things. And again, with climate change, it's like saying that a lot of the attention politically as well is saying that we keep looking at, what are the costs of taking action, and if we keep looking at the costs, we're just going to keep finding those costs.
Right.
Whereas we actually say, well, what are the benefits of us actually taking some action here and seeing it as an investment rather than a cost? Then we'll actually start creating those benefits.
So it really, I guess, comes down to, the politicians do what the people say at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the world obviously isn't quite ready for the changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I think it's. What keeps me really hopeful in this movement actually is that I've been working in this space for about 10 years now in various jobs, and this is actually really the first year where I've actually genuinely felt that a really powerful movement is actually emerging around climate change. And I guess that's one of the good things which has actually come out of Copenhagen, is that it's provided a focal point for attention for a whole lot of people this year in both the environmental and social justice movements, to actually come together, and you can really feel that movement really underway now. And that's just going to keep growing and building, because climate change isn't going to go away, and any inaction now from politicians and so forth is actually just going to fuel that movement anymore. So it's actually it's entered the cycle now where the movement's just going to keep getting stronger and stronger.
How much of a role do the media play in all this?
They, like all things in to do with social change, do play an enormous role, and I think it depends how climate change is actually reported. I think just noticing the last few weeks, again, a benefit of Copenhagen is how much more media interest there has been in what's happening with climate change. And I think in New Zealand we've suffered quite a lot, because there has been the way some media, I should say, have treated the issue as still trying to say, well, let's balance the issues by having some people saying it's happening and some it's not.
Is it still important to have that debate or not?
Well, I'm always happy for there'd be, completely free sharing of views. It's just whether there's, when 99% of scientists say that we've now got robust scientific evidence saying that climate change is occurring and it's due to, what humans are doing, then why should you give, 50% of your time sometimes to a few people who actually are denying that science? So it's, I think, keep the freedom of the views, but don't suppress the enormity of actually the issues at stake.
So do you think, Nick, that if you address other issues in society, like I noticed on your blog you talk about the injustices for people, you address some of those issues, the flow-on effects also help sort out climate change? Yes,
definitely. And I guess when I was talking about the layers of how we're looking at climate change as a problem, but it's a symptom, is I guess at its deepest level, really, it's a symptom of us really losing our connectedness in society. So that's both connectedness with our environment. So, try holding your breath for 10 minutes and you get a pretty quick, picture of the fact that we are actually our environment. We can't live without a good atmosphere.
Or even, would a symptom be the fact that we're not so connected with our food anymore?
Exactly.
What, an example?
Yeah, a totally good example. And that's the emphasis, I think, with a lot of people in the movement now, and I even, sometimes using the word the movement, it's such a broad thing. It's just
people are scared of that word, though, movement.
Yeah, some people are. It's just, I think it's useful because it's useful to say, well, what actually moves people? What moves you into doing something? And as you talk about food, I mean, part of it is people actually enjoying their food more, or their travel. How can we actually enjoy our travel more, and all those sorts of things, rather than trying to scare people into saying, oh, things are actually going to be worse if we take action. It's saying this is actually an opportunity to make things better. And with the social justice things you mentioned as well, like, again, it's just that very simple thing that when we cause harm to some people in our world, that harm rebounds on us, and when we care for people, that care comes back to us. So ultimately, I guess how I look at things is that if if anyone feels that something in our world is actually getting worse, then this is actually our chance to make things better. And then if we feel like we're making things better, we'll actually feel better as a result.
But isn't it true, Nick, that sometimes, most of the times, humans don't act not until things are getting worse, but until things are really bad. Until things are actually, until the oil crisis hits, or the waves are lapping at your door.
I think either when things do have to get bad enough sometimes, or when people can actually really see the threat immediately. So I was living in Melbourne a few years ago, and what really sparked the climate action movement there was the droughts, and that was a real example of people really actually visibly seeing the impacts of climate change starting to hit their country. So there is a lot of that, but I think also what I also talk about is just people's connection with their children, and so as they start to see more of these impacts happening around the world and realizing, are we actually leaving a better world for our children? That's a really strong motivator for people as well, or their grandchildren as well.
Well, people can read more about some of your thoughts on some of these issues, and they do come from a different perspective, and I think it's quite refreshing into the discussion. Movingtides.blogspot.com. Nick Potter, have a great festive season.
I will do. You
and
too.
And relax,
Great.
and hope to talk to you again soon.
Lovely. Thank
Cheers.
you. See ya.
Time now is 12 minutes away from 10 here on the Kiwi.